All right, we back. We back with another chapter. Another live reaction chapter 410. Good humor. We're gonna just jump into it because I kind of already talked everything. Giving my thoughts about chapter 409 with Cecilia and everything. So we're gonna just get straight into the chapter. 410. Good humor. Arthur. Okay, so this is great. We're going back to Arthur. Okay, we're going back to Arthur. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's gonna happen. Hopefully the chapter's dope. But let's see. Let's just kind of get into it. Okay. Where's your pet, Alacrian? Gideon asks. So they're talking about. I'm trying to remember these names. Lyra. They're talking about Lyra. Gideon asks, staring around warily as if Lyra Dry might jump out of the shadows from any direction. His face was soot-stained, and I couldn't help but notice that his eyebrows were gone again, and part of his hair. His eyebrows are gone again, and part of his hair had been singed. Not that I want her to see this, but where can you lock up a retainer and expect her to stay? That's actually a good point, because I remember they had talked about in the chapter that he didn't really expect for that to be able to like keep her in, but it was more like for appearances, but she's quote unquote being compliant to prove that she is useful to Arthur. And plus, Arthur can kill her if he really wanted to. So there's that. Next to Gideon, Emily gave me a small wave. She was pale-faced and had dark bags under her eyes. I want to learn more about. I just completely forgot all about it. I want to learn more about Ellie and her new regalia and like what all she can do and maybe how Gideon explains it. So next to Gideon, Emily gave me a small wave. She was pale-faced and had dark bags under her eyes. But the fact that she was on her feet at all spoke to a return of her strength. It had only been a couple days since the bestowment test, and without Ellie's regalia, I felt sure it would have taken Emily several more days to recover. Okay, so that essentially points out to the fact that her regalia accelerated the process of her. She's not at full strength, so her regalia isn't like perfect, and she's gonna be at full strength after going into Backlash. But it definitely accelerated the process. So he said several more days. So I mean, that could be 5 to 7 more days, So I mean, it's been a couple days, they said, so that means that it would have been so probably if it normally would have taken a week, 10 days to recover, with her regalia being used, it took her 3 days to recover. I mean, that's pretty good. That can't be the limits of her abilities, but that's what we know so far. So without Ellie's regalia, I felt sure it would have taken Emily several more days to recover. I had one of the vaults in Earthborn Institute fitted out to be a cell, I said, coming to a stop before the two inventors. Regis and Micah are watching over her while she coaches my sister on the regalia. Oh, okay, so she's coaching. She's becoming a teacher now. Gideon huffed as he turned around and started to walk quickly away. We were standing on the lowest floor of the Victorial. Oh, not Victorial. We're not in the Victoria. The Vildorial, surrounded by freshly constructed stone dwellings. The destruction of the Sives attack. Wait. Surrounded by freshly constructed stone dwellings. The destruction of the Sives attack on the city already a distant memory, at least physically. I can still see the threat of attack in the furtive glances of the dwarves and the elves that bustled about. In a way, they avoided small talk and never moved their hands too far from their weapons. So they're like kind of preparing themselves for like another attack and stuff, which makes sense. It was with mixed feelings I saw some of the tension melt away whenever they saw me. Why is he Arthur, man? I will never understand. Why does he hate? Like, bro, you literally do everything you can to be unique, different, special, and the savior, saving people's lives, all this shit. But then you hate the attention. It doesn't make sense, bro. Like you do. It reminds me of? It reminds me of like the fight that he had with what was Tessia's friend's name? That shit, I can't think. But remember the fight? It was sometime, you know, with Professor Glory and the troops she was leading, and it was the cook, Madam Astria or Astera, and remember he had the whole little fight thing on the little the battlegrounds or whatever the fuck it was called. And remember he had to fight with her with Tessia's friend, and he ended up like hitting like mana pressure points. Was the first time we even heard of any of this shit, and they like restricted his mana or something like that. Like, you literally do shit to be flashy, but then you say that you don't want the attention. It's contradictive. Like bro, like what are you talking about? Mixed feelings when they get more relaxed when you're around. Yeah, bro, because you're a fucking god to them. Like, you do shit that they've never seen before, so it's expected for them to be that way. He is just something else, I swear. It was with mixed feelings that I saw some of that tension melt away whenever they saw me, my presence bolstering their courage. You should have all 3 lances on her, at least. Gideon continued after a moment as he led us into. I mean, we really need all. I guess, but what, Micah and Regis? That should be enough. If she ever did some shit, Regis could probably keep her at bay. Yeah, by himself, he could probably keep her at bay. And then with Micah there, they could probably overwhelm her. So Gideon continued after a moment as he led us in a narrow tunnel that I knew connected to some old mining shafts. The lances are not mine to order around, I pointed out conversationally. A small dwarven boy waved, a huge gap-toothed grin on his round face, and I raised a hand in return. Then followed Gideon into the dark tunnel. Byron stays by Virian's side at almost all times, and Virian has been busy tending to his flock. Right? He's talking about the elves. With Dicathan shifting back into our control, he's been able to reach out to more of the elves scattered around the continent. Okay, so that's actually kind of cool to know. So Byron and Virian, their bond is still strong. Byron still is like looking at Virian as his commander, and he's there protecting them, and so that's really cool. But they haven't talked about any advances they made with their cores. So when are they going to talk about that? And what did he say about Viray? No, he didn't say anything about Viray yet. He just said that he's followed Virian. Okay, that makes sense. And so that's cool. So then they're getting some of the elves that are scattered around and finding them, letting them know that they took over the continent again and having them come back home. Okay, they're trying to figure out how many are left, Emily said softly, her voice hoarse with emotion. Yeah, a lot of elves died, man. It's just fucked up. Kessis. See, it's like when that happens, you want to blame Kessis, but it's like, at the end of the day, it is Aldir who decided to do that ability. It was Aldir who even has that ability in the first place. So as much as I want to blame Kessis, it's really Aldir's fault. Aldir could have said no. It probably would have ended up with the Pantheon, not the Pantheon race, but the clan that he was a part of, because we know that there's a bunch of different races, but they all have separate clans. Not all of them are like all linked up together, and so it would have ended up his clan being taken out of the Great Eight and ended up having another clan take their place. So I mean, it's Aldir's fault. It's not Kessis. Like, Kessis made the order, but you're the one that carried out the order, even though you knew the order was wrong. You know what I'm saying? So it's Aldir. It's Aldir's fault on that. The same despair that clung ragged to her words clawed at the back of my throat, and I had to cough to shake it loose. Fighting broke out in Caliburg, and Viray went to assist. Apparently, some of the soldiers who fled from Blackbend made it to Caliburg and warned them what was happening. Instead of surrendering, right, okay, so that makes sense. They warned them about what was happening. They warned them about Arthur retaking, the continent. Instead of surrendering, the High Bloods in charge of the city locked it down and dug in. All the more reason to forge ahead with my other project, Gideon insisted. Moving quickly despite the dim lighting. This war isn't over yet. No, it isn't, I thought, considering what will come next. I have been trying to put myself in Agrona's place, using everything I knew about him to gauge his next move. If Kessis, okay, so this is cool. So now we got Arthur using some tactics, right? If Kessis fulfill his end of our agreement, then it was my hope that we've seen the last of any full-scale battle on Dicathian soil. I think that's Dicathian soil. And it was possible, if perhaps overly hopeful, that Agrona might simply write Dicathian off as more trouble than it was worth and turn his focus to Ephiodus. What is Agrona even trying to achieve by taking over Dicathian in the first place? Because I remember he said that he didn't want to mix bloods, so he didn't want to like continue on doing the, the population experiments and stuff like that. We know that Kessis said that he was using Dicathian as some sort of shield against Ephiodus. If perhaps overly hopeful, the Agrona might simply write Dicathian off as more trouble than it was worth and turn his focus to Ephiodus. One particular element made that course unlikely, however. Me. I still didn't understand how Agrona had come by his knowledge of reincarnation. Right. We still don't know how the fuck he's able to do this shit at all. Like, it's insane. He can't even go into the relic tombs. Or how he had been able to search across worlds to find the legacy and the other two anchor points he needed to fully manifest her potential in this world, me and Nico. But regardless of how he had made these discoveries, their implementation hadn't gone as he planned. I had been reincarnated on the wrong continent in the wrong body. How does he know all this? Like, yeah, the wrong continent, sure, but the wrong body? I mean, I guess you can kind of assume that because you weren't in Agrona's presence when you were born, like how Cecilia was, or like how Nico was. Yeah, I guess you could just make that assumption. He had been forced to look outside his own domain for a vessel. Instead of being an anchor point entirely under his control, I became his enemy. And through the actions of his own, because yeah, if Arthur would have reincarnated in the body that Agrona wanted, he probably would have manipulated his memories in his mind to get him to be subservient to him, which would be scary. That would be crazy as fuck. And through his actions of his own daughter, I was given the only power in this world potentially capable of standing up to both Agrona and Kessis. And I was under no illusion that either one of them was just let that go. Kessis was willing to exchange favors for knowledge in a tenuous alliance. But Agrona, I knew the Lord of the Rutra clan couldn't help but want what I had, which was his knowledge. Knowledge. I need to put a clip in. Just have what's his name, just with the Ferrari or they're just knowledge. That's what they need from him. Knowledge. I knew the Lord of the Rutra clan couldn't help but want what I had. The idea of striking a similar bargain with him, a trade of etheric knowledge for his vow to leave Dicathian alone, had crossed my mind. But after much consideration, I also knew there was no vow he could make that I could rely on. See, yeah, you can't rely on it, but then you can't rely on Kessis' vow either, which you already stated. So at the end of the day, you're kind of still in the same place. If you struck a vow with Agrona, you couldn't trust Agrona with him keeping his end of the bargain, but you also realize that you can't trust Kessis to keep his end of the agreement. But you could probably trust Kessis more than you could trust Agrona, unless you strike a deal with Mordain. I mean, how did they not explore the Beast Glades more? I mean, they always talked about how they said that they got tons of areas of the Beast Glades that's like unexplored with S-class mana beasts, SS-class mana beasts, and whoever knows what other type of mana beasts there are. I don't know. Anyways, I also knew there was no vow he could make that I could rely on, and even if I decided to take such a risk, I couldn't co-sign the entire population of Alakria to their fate just because Dicathian had been made safe. Yes, because unlike Cecilia, you're not a fucking barbarian colonizing tyrant. You actually care about other fucking people, regardless if they're different from you, have different cultures, different societies. You value life at the end of the day, which is great, which is what makes Arthur great. This is why he's the hero. Regardless of his intentions towards Dicathin, Agrona would come after me again eventually. I couldn't just sit around Viduriel waiting for that to happen. These and many other thoughts occupied my mind. These and many other thoughts occupied my mind as we dwelled into the old mining tunnels. The tunnels grew hot and stuffy. The rock all around us radiating heat, and the air was thick with sulfuric burning smell. We passed through several exhausted fire salt veins, the shafts themselves abandoned for more fertile ground, until eventually our tunnel opened up into a much larger cavern. Scaffolding had been constructed up the sheer walls, and railings hung from the ceiling high above. Thin veins of fire salts were still visible in some places, but their low glow was overshadowed by a series of bright lighting artifacts that had been set up in a grid across the floor. I was surprised to see 6 men and women, 4 dwarves, an elven man, a human woman, already waiting for us. They had been sitting around a worn work table and chatting idly, but jumped to their feet as a group when they saw us approaching. "Master Gideon, sir," one of the dwarves said. He had a frizzy mop of dark hair and a beard down to his waist. What the fuck name is this? Bro, I can't pronounce this shit. Man, I already hate the fucking English language, and then they got these weird ass crazy names with silent letters and shit. Crowhulb, I don't fucking know. I assume you got the package down here without... what package? I assume you got the package down here without trouble, Gideon asked, moving directly to a stack of metal crates resting on the other side of the... It must be some experiment that Gideon has been... Maybe it's the gun that he was talking about that was powered by the mana crystals, because he said that this war isn't over yet, so he must have some other power up. Of course, the dwarf said, grinning. Glad to finally see these artifacts put to use. Gideon grabbed the first crate. Immediately failed to move it more than an inch or two, and then turned to two of the other dwarves. "You two, drag this over here and open it for me." I watched curiously as the 2 dwarves together lifted the top crate, moved it to a separate workbench, and then opened the lid. A shimmer of heat haze. This might be something to do with the fire salts, probably, they had him experimenting with back when he was captured. Could be something with that. A shimmering heat of haze appeared momentarily above the open crate, accompanied by the same sort of dim orange glow that lit up the darker recess of the cavern ceiling above. Gideon pulled on a pair of heavy leather gloves, like those used at a forge, and then reached into the box. Metal scraped against metal, and then Gideon lifted out one of his artifacts. It was a sword with a straight... What? It was a sword with a straight, double-edged blade. Curling veins of dim orange swirled and spiraled through the dull gray steel. As I leaned in closer to get a better look, I could feel heat coming off the weapon. The crossguards were slightly too large, almost clunky, with a bastard-style hilt that could be wielded comfortably with 1 or 2 hands. I activated Realm Heart, and the cave shifted into a riot of color as mana particles became visible. Fire attribute particles clung to the blade, dancing up and down its length along the glowing orange lines. A strong source of mana radiated from the hilt as well. This is interesting as fuck. Can he mass produce these? Gideon held the sword out to me, handle first. The dark leather was warm to the touch, but not hot. Gingerly, I ran a finger along the flat of the blade, pulled back as the scorching heat of the fire salt infused steel seared my flesh. What? So he handed the sword out to me, handle first. The dark leather was warm to the touch, but not hot. He ran a finger along the flat of the sword, but pulled back as the scorching heat of the fire salt infused steel seared my flesh. Bro, why are you like, man, he's a fucking masochist, yo. Like, why are you always trying to hurt yourself? Gideon snorted. I guess I'll have to add a warning label to the hilt that reads, "Hey, idiot, don't touch the glowing hot steel." I chuckled as I took a step back and swung the blade experimentally. It wasn't the finest craftsmanship I'd ever felt, especially in the balance department, but these were only Gideon's prototypes. I expected their designs to be refined as more weapons were crafted. Infusing the steel worked as we discussed, I asked, spinning the blade around and down in a cut that left a heat haze arc in its wake. Emily responded through a half-stilted yawn. The crucible method was genius. Suffusing the fire salts into the melted iron allowed us to get the mineral itself hot enough to liquefy, and increasing the carbon content of the steel by infusing it with high carbon iron allowed the fire salts to bind to the steel, solving two problems at once. Yes. The Wonder Kid did it again. Gideon grumbled, though I could tell he wasn't actually happy. At the center of the workbench rested a much smaller shield generator, like the one we'd used during the bestowment testing. Gideon activated it with a pulse of mana, then stepped back and looked at me expectantly. "Go on, touch the blade to the shielding." "The mana shield?" "Gently though," he added quickly. "We don't need freakish land strength right now." Bruh. Gideon's funny. So go on, touch the blade to the shielding. Gently though, we don't need freakish land strength right now. I just want you to see. Rolling my eyes, I lowered the blade towards the small bubble shield. When the edge contacted the transparent barrier, it hissed and popped, sending off sparks. I raised the edge slightly, breaking the contact, and the noise subsided, though a thin trail of smoke rose up from the sword. Without waiting for further instructions, I pushed the blade down again, harder this time. The sword and shield surged against each other, and the mana inherent to the blade's structure. The sword and shield surged against each other, the mana inherent to the blade's structure clashing with the mana forming the shield. It lasted a second, two, and then, with a sputtering hum, the shield artifact lost power and the shield itself popped. Okay. So I guess the mana in the sword is interacting with the shield as like a tug of war, and the shield doesn't have enough power to. Maybe. Okay. This is only a very low power generator, but you see, Gideon said, his eyes bright. The fire salts, even in this form, continue to attract fire attribute mana, creating a strong enough force to counter, and with enough strength even break through an opposing mage's shields. Wow. Okay. That's cool. But imagine if Ren is there. He'll be able to create so much crazy ass shit, man. Anyway, let me just calm down. I'm guessing Tournament is gonna save Aldir and Ren for a while. Man, I thought they would have shown up by now, but I guess he's like really waiting. Maybe they might visit the Beast Glades. I don't know. I held the weapon up to examine it more closely. There was a sort of trigger enabled into the clunky crossguard. What's this do? Gideon grinned manically. A weapon hot enough to sear flesh, capable of countering enemy shields without being imbued with mana, was a good starting point. But a non-mage, even a talented warrior, will still be at a disadvantage against an augmenter. The mage can empower his body, strengthen his muscles, and enhancing his speed and reaction times. This feature may not entirely counter such overt imbalances between an augmenter and non-magical soldier, but it definitely adds to the experience. I'm pretty sure Master Gideon just wanted to fit his original canon idea into the weapon somehow. Emily said under her breath. Gideon scowled and shooed Emily and the 6 non-mages back. Go on, trigger it, but only for a moment. It has the strongest effect if done while swinging the sword. Okay. Moving back to put even more room between myself and others, I took a couple more practice swings with the sword, getting used to its heft and balance. Then, as I made a sharp sideways cut from left to right, I pressed the stiff trigger. Mana rushed from the grip into the blade, and the sword burst into flames. At the same time, it lurched forward. Bruh, is this like a Getsuga Tencho? Like, what the fuck is this? Oh, what's another like flaming attack? I can't even think of one. That shit's funny. At the same time, it lurched forward. At the same time, Mana rushed from the grip into the blade, and the sword burst into flames. At the same time, it lurched forward as if propelled from behind. I absorbed the unexpected momentum by twirling the blade, releasing the trigger in the act, and then bringing it back up in front of me so I could examine the effects. The orange veins were glowing more brightly, although the excess mana was being burnt through very quickly. Okay, so he could potentially see the ways to make it more efficient. Although the excess mana was being burnt through very quickly, perhaps 20% of the mana stored in the handle had been expended in that single explosion. Gideon said, practically vibrating as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. When triggered during a forceful movement, the sudden influx of mana in the fire cells causes a violent combustion effect, which can add to the speed and strength of a strike, as well as creating a fiery explosion. It's a little unwieldy at the moment, Emily added, but with the right training, a non-mage soldier should be able to properly time the target pretty devastatingly. Let me reread this. But with the right training, a non-mage soldier should be able to properly time and target pretty devastating strikes with it. Her words drew my attention to the 6 non-mages watching quietly from a safe distance. I glanced around the large, empty, shuttered mine. What are we doing here? Gideon clapped his hands together. I'm sick and tired of lab tests. That's why it's time to see these babies. So is he about to use So is he about to use the non-mages as there, and they're going to test out the blades with Arthur being a sort of like teacher for him? That's crazy. And I guess they're going to like go against Arthur or whatever. That's kind of cool though. That's kind of cool. I'm tired of tests. That's why it's time to see these babies in action. He waved toward the rest of the boxes while shouting at non-majors. All right, test dummies, grab your equipment and get ready. After a moment, he added, and make sure to stretch. The last thing I need is my test scuttled because someone pulled a muscle. I was staring at Gideon, but he seemed to be purposefully ignoring me. Emily moved to my side, reaching for the sword with a gloved hand. Sorry, he insisted. You don't have to, but you really are the best choice. If something goes wrong, you can just heal. After all, not that I expect any of these people to even land a hit on you. She smiled. Okay, so we got like a little mock battle going on. It's a little testing thing. See, I don't know. I want Ellie to do some fighting with swords too, but like her bow is cool too. But like, I don't know. But okay, it's cool we get a little bit of action this time though. If something goes wrong, you can just heal. After all, not that I expect any of these people to even land a hit on you. She smiled, half turned, and then said, although if you let them get a couple hits in, it will help with the testing. I think you need to spend some time away from Gideon. Her name's M now? That's my first time I heard her call her M. Grumbled, I grumbled, cracking my neck and rolling my shoulders. You're starting to sound just like him. As it turned out, these 6 non-mages had already been training with the weapons, both to test them for Gideon and to prepare for a live combat exercise. This is his fucking name. Crowholb. That's what we're gonna say. And the other dwarves have been involved first, but Gideon had gone out of his way to find both a human and elf volunteer with previous combat experience to ensure that heat and force of the blade wouldn't be too much for someone with a slighter. Like, what did he say? But Gideon had gone out of his way to find both a human and elf volunteer with previous combat experience to ensure the heat and force of the blade wouldn't be too much for someone with a slighter skeletal structure and less gently tough skin. It didn't take long for them to get ready, armored in heavy leather designed to protect them not from me, but from the weapon each of them wielded. There were 2 swords, each with slightly different designs. 3 battle mages, 1 long glaive, and Gideon explained, wait, 2 swords, 3 battle axes, and 1 long glaive. That's crazy. As Gideon explained, they wanted to see how the fire salt's infused steel reacted with forged into different shapes as well as different sizes. Exactly. So to find out what's best or what they need to tweak. That makes a lot of sense. This is literally an experiment. Forged into different shapes as well as the varying size and the mana crystal rods that have been inset into the handle of each weapon. Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to see how this goes. I'm ready. Standing in the center of the large cave, surrounded by the leather-wrapped warriors, I branded a plain metal rod pulled from. I thought he was about to use one of his ether blades. I brandished a plain metal rod pulled from some of the abandoned materials, a much safer weapon for the experiment than my conjured etheric blade. Right, his etheric blade will probably slice that shit or something. You know, it might go through the blades or some shit. I don't know. Don't go easy on him, you lot. Remember, he's practically immortal. Fucking Gideon, man. Gideon is psycho, man. He's psycho, bro. Like, he's immortal. Use everything you have. It's for the experiment. Fucking mad scientist ass. Alright, remember he's practically immortal. He can take it. Now, get to it. Gideon's eyes gleamed hurriedly or hungrily from where he and Emily had barricaded themselves behind a much stronger shield generator. Next to him, Emily was hunkered silently over a notebook and quill, ready to take note of everything that happened. I exchanged a respectful bow with my opponents, then settled back into a loose defensive posture. The elven man moved first, his glaive slashing downward. Oh, he got a glaive now. Slashing downward and exploding into flame the moment Gideon gave the command. But the force of the burst was too powerful for the little elf, especially since he couldn't strengthen his body with mana, and the glaive yanked to the side, slamming onto the ground in front of Krohob, who had jumped forward to slash with his axe at my legs. The dwarf tripped. Oh my god. Yeah, they're not ready for these weapons, bro. The dwarf had tripped over the glaive's handle and went spiraling. I spun away from the metal, bringing my piece of iron up to deflect a swing from a sword-wielding dwarf. I made sure to control my movements, working to match the speed and strength of my opponents. Otherwise, I risked shattering bones and dislocating limbs with my blocks and counter-strikes. Yeah, gotta be careful. Gotta be careful. Shattering bones and dislocating limbs with my blocks. So what, you can break bones with just blocks? That's crazy, bro. The fire salt sword bit into the iron rod, then exploded in a combustion that singed my face. The sword soars downward, shearing my weapon into 2 pieces. Oh shit. And glancing harmlessly off the ether cladding my skin. With a short iron bar in each hand, I smacked the sword aside, stepped into a chopping axe, letting it rebound off my unarmored shoulder without trying to block it. Smacked the sword aside and stepped into a chopping axe, letting it rebound off my unarmored shoulder without trying to block it, and instead throwing my forearm into the wielder's chest. Not hard enough to injure, but more than enough to send him sprawling onto his back. The human woman jumped over the fallen dwarf and brought her sword down with both hands towards me. I crossed the shirt bars over my head to catch the blade. Between them, the woman triggered the fire salt's burst, creating an explosion of fire and burst of momentum that forced the searing hot steel straight through the remainder of my iron rod. Yeah, that iron rod ain't really doing shit for him because they're just slicing through it with the fire salt's burst. Taking a single short step back, I purposefully let the blade's glowing point claw across my front. To my surprise, it seared through the thin skin of ether. Wait. Taking a single short step back, I purposefully let the blade's glowing point claw across my front. To my surprise, it seared through the thin skin of ether that always clad my body and scored a line across the front of my shirt and into my flesh before slamming into the ground at my feet, driving into the solid rock. The woman's eyes went wide, and she started to mumble out what I'm certain was meant to be an apology, but the words never manifested. Gripped tightly in both her hands, the trigger was still compressed. The mana built rapidly in the blade until it vibrated. Before I could warn her to release it, the sword exploded. Whoa. A storm of flames and steel shrapnel engulfed us. Lunging forward, I wrapped my arms around the woman as she rolled back, lifting her off her feet and pulling her leather-covered body close to mine. The ether pathways revealed by Godstep were humming to me before I even thought to look. Man, his Godstep shit. The pathways were humming to him before he even thought about looking for the pathways. Like, they're just there. Where do you want to go? Over there. The ether pathways revealed by Godstep were humming to me before I even thought to look, and I stepped into them. We appeared in a flash of purple lightning while the white-orange flames of the sword's explosion were still erupting behind us. Hot steel shards pinned into the stone all over the chamber, so hot and fast they buried themselves into the hard stone floors and ceilings. Stone walls, floor, and ceilings. The others dove away from the blast, covering up as best they could, their heavy leather armor providing good protection against the heat, but very little against razor-sharp shrapnel. The woman's panic panting as she struggled to rip off her protective helmet forced my attention back on her. She was clawing at... Did a piece get stuck in her helmet and it's like burning her skin? She was clawing at the helm with one hand while her other trembled violently in her lap. I helped to unbuckle the helmet and she tossed it aside. Her face was red with exertion and the heat of her armor. She began rapidly paling as she stared at me in horror. Looking down, I realized my torso was peppered with small wounds. As I watched, the line she'd drawn down my chest with the tip of her blade and the many other smaller punctures healed over, in some cases pushing out small fragments of the sword, which clinked on the ground at my feet. After all our training, Gideon grumbled, coming out from behind the shield. Rule number 2, don't hold down the trigger. Yeah. Is anyone hurt? Emily asked weakly, staring at a crater in the stone where the woman's sword had been. I glanced around the space, but it didn't seem as if anyone had been badly wounded. I appeared to have absorbed a significant amount of the shrapnel so that even the human woman only had superficial cuts and scrapes from the shards themselves, although I could tell from the holes buried in her armor that there had been a few near misses as well. It went wrong so fast, I thought sourly, listening to the other combatants calling out to one another to make sure everyone was okay. If I'd have thought more quickly, I could have forced the mana to implode instead of explode, or even stabilize the sword itself to prevent the accident entirely. Yeah, but you were like still kind of fighting though, so it's like you got cut, it went through your ether armor skin, and then after that it went down into the ground and then it exploded. Like, the shit happened fast as fuck. This was a problem I had been dimly aware of in the back of my mind, but was highlighted by this incident. As I gained more abilities such as Realm Heart, it became more difficult to fully utilize each in combat. Although I could teleport instantly with Godstep God Room, my reaction times and even my perception were still limited by my own training and physical attributes. Although I could teleport instantly with Godstep God Room, my reaction times and even my perception were still limited by my own training and physical abilities. Reaction times and perception. Yeah, I mean, you do need to get stronger, bro. You need to be able to defeat like a top Asura one-on-one is what I would say. A hiss of pain drew me back to the human woman who was shaking as she tried to pull off her heavy gloves. Gently, I took hold of the fingers and eased the gloves off her. Underneath, her hands were already turning purple. Broken, I said softly, but not irreparably so. We have emitters in Vidorio who can heal this painlessly. Emily, Gideon shouted as he walked up. He chewed on his bottom lip as he stared down at the... Okay, you know what I'm just wondering? So do they still have those crystals? Y'all remember when Alice had gave Arthur that glove with the 3 crystals when he went to be an adventurer? And it was like a healing spell, and you could just crack it. It helped heal you a little bit. Why won't they just like mass produce those? So whenever there's any sort of like, her hands are broken, you can pop that healing spell and be able to like help heal her hand, or just being used entirely. I mean, there's a lot of ideas. The whole pressure points with the whole ether shit, or not the ether, the pressure points with the mana stuff to disrupt your mana, like he did with the guy. Like that ability or skill just kind of like never came back up again. The healing crystals never came back up again. So it's quite a few skills in the story that just don't really get brought up again. It's kind of used for that situation conveniently, but then it doesn't get touched on again. Anyway, Emily, Gideon shouted as he walked up. He chewed on his bottom lip as he stared down at the wound and waited as Emily hurried over, one hand holding her notebook and pen, and the other adjusting her glasses as they bounced up and down. Get Chandra here, a healer, will you? I suppose I should have had an emitter on standby just in case, but then I didn't expect one of you to immediately forget the rules. And Gideon trailed off as Emily, Chandra, and I all gave him meaningful looks. Blah! Give me that, he said, plucking the notebook out of her grasp. The rest of you back to your places. We go again. Emily wrapped her arm. Oh wow, they're just starting up again. Emily wrapped her arm around Chandra and helped her up. The woman's face had finally settled on green, and she couldn't take her eyes off her shattered hand and wrist. And for the love of life itself, don't hold down the damn trigger, Gideon snapped, watching Emily and Chandra stumble from the cavern. Okay, so now we transition. The experimentation with the fire assault weapons lasted only an hour longer, during which time there were no more accidents. After wrapping up, providing my feedback to Gideon, and wishing the rest well, I hurried back into the city to check on my sister. Okay, cool. So what did your sister learn? Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Leaving her with an enemy retainer, even on the other side of a mana repressing cell door watched over by Lance and my own companion, had been uncomfortable. When I returned, however, it was to the sound of Ellie howling with laughter, the noise of it carrying far down the halls of the Earthborn Institute. When I rounded the corner that brought Lyra's cell into sight, I found Ellie sitting cross-legged on a mat in front of the cell. Wait, are they just like just getting along swimmingly right now? I found Ellie sitting cross-legged on a mat in front of the cell, curled over in breathless glee, while Regis pranced around on his hind 2 legs, flailing as if he were in terrible pain. So is he just like doing jokes or some shit, doing some acting? Micah was grasping for breath. Micah was gasping for breath. One bald fist pounding on the wall, and she too seemed entirely overtaken by hilarity. No, Regis, it's the only way, he was rumbling in a cartoonishly affected baritone. I just have to boil myself in lava. I can like picture this shit happening, bro. It's the fucking crazy. No, Regis, it's the only way. He was rumbling in a cartoonishly affected baritone. I just have to boil myself in lava. I can't possibly do this without. He caught sight of me and stopped suddenly. Then slowly sank down on all fours. Oh, Hey there, boss. Oh god. Ellie's eyes opened and she pointed at me and laughed so hard that snot spurted from her nose. Becca gave a wild snort and then the two only laughed harder. They are like, is Lyra laughing? If Lyra is laughing, I am going to be shocked, bruh. Once I was close enough to meet Lyra's eyes through the bars, I sent her a serious frown. Are you messing with their brains or something with your sound attribute spells? Lyra, who was leaning against the inside wall with her arms crossed, shrugged. No, your summons has provided ample distraction without me doing anything. I was happy exploring the depths of your sister's new regalia, but I won't pretend not to have enjoyed his stories about your time in the Relic Tombs. You really have seen and done some strange things, Regent Lewin. Bro, he's literally spoiling shit, bro. Revealing secrets. You can't be revealing shit, Regis. What's wrong with you? Micah was struggling to stand up straight and suppress her fit of giggles. Her jaw was clenched tight, but both lips and a muscle in her cheek were twitching constantly. She threw me a lazy salute and said, "Welcome back, General Masochist." Now listen for a second. If it was Beret or if it was Byron who was there to watch over, and it wasn't Micah, which is more the free-spirited of all the Lances, if this is Beret or Byron, I doubt any of this shit would have even happened. If Regis would have even started doing this shit, Beret would have been serious. Like, cut it out, stop it right now. Byron would have been like, cut it out right now. You know, like they wouldn't even got that. But Micah, she fucking just balling. That's crazy. General Masochist. The Alacrian has been surprisingly well behaved. Thank you, Micah, I said with a bone-deep sigh to Ellie. I asked, did you accomplish anything? Wiping tears from her eyes, she grinned up at me. I'm figuring things out, I think. It's hard, not hard. Weird, like relearning how to use magic from the beginning. But there's all this power there, ready to respond. Lyra thinks I'll need to grow into the regalia. Lyra moved to the front of the cell, standing just inside the room bars. I'm not entirely certain regalia is even the correct term. This ability of yours to impact the bestowment, it is, she trailed off with a shake of her head, her lips curling up wryly. The High Sovereign will pull off his own horns to be able to do what you can. I'm certain of it. Yeah. He's like a passive regalia power-up. Not regalia, but a passive bestowment power-up. The High Sovereign will pull off his own horns to be able to do what you can. I'm certain of it. The rune she received is powerful, beyond what I've seen received even by other retainers or the Sai's themselves, to be honest. It is too much for her. The purpose of mastering a lower rune before regaining a crest, emblem, or regalia is to build a mage's strength and magical talent. Most mages never receive an emblem, much less a regalia. Your sister, well, I'm not sure she'll ever be able to make use of this regalia properly. It will require a significant strengthening and clarification of her core to fully control. Yeah, that makes sense, because she's only light. I say only, but she's only light yellow. So maybe she'll be able to clearly control it if she ever gets to like white core. Beyond that, I have attempted to make clear to her it is also quite dangerous if she pushes too hard. The rune could empty her core and leave her crippled. I didn't respond immediately, instead taking the time to digest Lyra's words as I looked down at my sister. Her ash brown hair, the same color as our father's, I remember was slightly disheveled. As the retainer had talked, the mirthful expression had slowly slid off Emily's face, replaced by a small but determined frown, making her look more like our mother. I couldn't help but be of two minds, both about Ellie and the bestowals in general. Being able to instantly clarify a mage's potentially any mage's core while simultaneously granting them access to a powerful spell could change how Daikathan viewed magic. We could potentially churn out elite mages at a pace previously unheard of, but to get the best results from this process, I needed to spend a significant amount of time with each mage, and I'm only one person. I rationalized. Knowing this drastically limited the tool's overall usefulness. The tool. I mean, not really, because everybody can still get like a crest or a mark or some shit like that, you know. But some people still got powerful runes without even being around Arthur at all, you know, like the other sides and, you know, other people and stuff. So anyway, also I spent enough time in Alakria to see how the presence of these spell forms could completely overtake our magical culture. There were benefits, certainly, but the potential dangers were so varied and widespread that it was difficult to see the whole picture. A deep-set guilt was already seeping into me for allowing Ellie to get involved. I had given her this power, knowing it could be dangerous, but having such clear confirmation that she could easily harm herself with the spell form reminded me that I was responsible for anything that might happen to her. I mean, you're not really responsible. She's kind of responsible, because once you're warned about the dangers, you have to take the precautions. Like, it's her responsibility to make sure she doesn't fucking kill herself. He blames himself way too much for like everything. Like, she literally was about to beg you to be part of the experiment. Your mom even gave her blessing for it too. So it's just like, it's not all your fault, Arthur. Like, what the fuck? Reminded me that I was responsible for anything that might happen to her. I looked deep into Ellie's almond-shaped brown eyes. Beyond the slight frown that turned down her lips, it was her eyes that revealed the depth of her maturity, a depth that felt too deep for her age. I was aware that during my absence, she had stepped up for our mother, for Daikathan, at a level I wish she didn't have to yet. I still thought of her as a child, and because of that, I hadn't allowed myself to trust her, especially not with this newfound power. She was reckless, true, and had proven herself irresponsible on more than one occasion, but she was also perceptive, courageous, and self-sacrificing. She's been through far too much to still be considered a child, but she was still much too young to carry the burden of being an adult. But I knew at that moment that we had no choice. She no longer saw herself as a child, and I needed to stop treating her like one. Rather than constantly opposing her desires as I tried to force her into a role I was comfortable with, I needed to step back and allow her to grow in the direction she found most rewarding and comfortable. And this is what we call character development. This is what we call maturity. Understanding and recognizing the situation that you're in, and how, you know, you can't just continue to be selfish, and you need to start to do the things that she wants to be done. Yeah, man, Arthur, man, he's been growing the entire series, becoming more mature and more wise, and understanding that things aren't going to be the way he wishes them to be. And if he try to force her to be in that role that he talks about, that is just him being selfish, and she could end up holding resentment towards him. But let me finish up the chapter. She needed guidance instead of opposition. I held back a sigh and forced a smile on my face, then reached out a hand to pull my sister to her feet. She took it, hopping up energetically. "Come on, Elle, walk with me for a bit." Okay. That's the chapter. Okay, so I guess my final thoughts about this chapter would be that I thought more would happen. I mean, so far what happened in this chapter that I'm remembering is that, he did the test with the swords that Gideon had came up with, right? So he did the test, with the swords, and you know, they got potentially a new weapon, but it still needs to be, you know, worked out, which means that they're going to need time, which they don't really have a whole lot of. And you know, Byron is protecting Virion. They haven't touched on the Lance's development with their cores at all. And then it's just Emily, not Emily, but then it's just Ellie with her regalia, and you know how she got such a powerful rune, and she needs to strengthen her core and just overall strengthen herself, period. Which means that she shouldn't get anything else. She shouldn't get another bestowment. Like, if she got another regalia, she will be fucked up, you know. So she needs to strengthen herself. So it seems like Arthur, he said, can walk with me, right? So I'm guessing he's about to start treating her like an adult because she's mature. She's a lot older than her age would suggest, right? So I'm guessing that he's gonna just at this point just kind of you know, be more just treat her more like an adult. Maybe have certain expectations that he has of her. Maybe there's certain type of training, some type of warning or whatever, and how, you know, maybe letting her know that, listen, I'm not gonna, you know, try to protect you and try to stop you from doing what you want to do. You know, I guess just more like a teaching type of role as he's going to try to be, you know, try to guide her and, you know, making the right decisions and whatnot. But yeah, it was a cool chapter, you know, just kind of smooth, not too up, not too down. You know, if I'm just thinking about it now, I probably wouldn't give it a rating now, but it was a cool chapter. But let me know if you guys think the same thing. It's just like kind of just a cool chapter. There's not really too much to comment on, to be honest with you. I'll probably have to reread this one, but yeah, just a cool chapter. That's it for me. And you know, I'll check you guys out in the next video. Subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Y'all already know what it is. And I'll check you guys out. Peace.